everyone, welcome back as always to the Turning In podcast. Today, Amy and I talk a little bit about our sort of daily practice with I.F.S and some daily skills that you can utilize. We also do a quick and brief overview of the 6 F's. More will be deepened on that in upcoming episodes. As always, I hope that you enjoy, and today we're just going to hop right into it. Welcome back.
Oh, there was a sing-song tone to it this time.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Turning In podcast. Today, I am joined, as always, by Dr. Amy Crawford. Hello.
Hello, Megan.
How are we doing today?
Well, if I'm being honest, it's been a rough week. It's been a heart circus of all sorts of shapes and sizes. So, yeah. So
well, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, welcome to the show. You're not just with me today. You're with about 413 parts. So they're all here. Guests.
I was like, is it time for me to do your session?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was like, yeah. How do you feel about that?
How do you feel about that is a better question. No, I'm kidding. Today, actually, this is good timing because I think that, and thank you for sharing that, because I do think it shows the humanity here, right? We're going to talk a little bit about our daily skills and daily practice and sort of
Sorry, that makes me want to laugh. I was like, oh, sure we are, because I've been really good at it this week. But
well, we're a human,
right?
And
I've still been doing it. That's the bottom line. So
that is the bottom line, because life is life and Parts-a-Palooza is Parts-a-Palooza. And I feel it's funny how relationships, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I feel like
I can't stop laughing.
I don't know. I'm watching you laugh and I'm laughing too, but so sorry.
I'm thinking of a bag of chips. That's why I'm laughing.
Oh,
yes, a bag of
that
chips.
Was good.
Speaking of parts, yeah,
that was good. Do you want to expand on that, or do you just want to keep everybody?
Oh, well, sure. So Megan was texting. Megan and I were texting. I think it would have been Tuesday. Yeah,
yes.
Tuesday. Hey, yes, Tuesday is what it was. Tuesday was a day in all the dimensions of my life. And Megan was texting me, and I was like, yeah, don't mind me. I'm just binging on a bag of tortilla chips and salsa. And she's like, well, of course, it's tortilla chips and salsa. And I was like, no. Like, a part of me is binging on them in such a way they're like falling out of my mouth, and there's like crumbs of chips like on the floor and on the counter. It's pretty disgusting. And so, yeah, so that there, yeah. And so then Megan was just laughing at me.
It made me laugh so much.
And then she tenderly said, I love you. And I was like, I love you too. And then I was like, and now I'm crying and I'm shoveling more chips in my mouth. So,
yeah. No, I do love you, and the whatever part, and just chips, and just the visual that I had of because I've done that, I think we all have done that. It's chips and salsa, for God's sake. It's the best thing that's ever been placed on this planet. But just like as soon as that chip hits your mouth, you have to be standing in the kitchen. And as soon as that chip hits your mouth, there is another chip in the salsa, or in the just this ready to go.
And your posture's kind of bad, and you're kind of like hunched over.
I'm hunched over. Yeah. It's like a I'm a goblin when there's chips and
legitimately.
Salsa.
Truly.
So, yeah. Anyways, yes, welcome to the Turning In podcast, everybody. This is our real life and our real, our reality. So, talking about daily skills, we didn't super duper plan this episode. It's kind of been on our roster for a while. I'm actually really intrigued, Amy, to hear about your sort of practice with I.F.S nowadays, because I know that it's morphed and changed, and I wouldn't actually say that I have any kind of daily practice. So I'm intrigued to hear what yours is, and then I can obviously share kind of what I do when I'm in those chips and salsa moments.
Because there's a difference, right? There's chips and salsa moments, and then there's
Oh,
heart, like,
and then
yeah,
there's like
chips and salsa.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I've recently been in like the chips and
Hmm.
salsa, less than
Yeah.
just like the gremlin stage. And
Yeah.
so, however, I feel pretty well out of that for right now. So yeah, it'll come back around, but I'm intrigued to hear. Do you have like specific things that you do on a daily basis to
Yes.
get into self like yeah, walk us through,
Hmm.
like, do you wake up in the morning and you're like, "Oh, let me get my journal out and immediately start writing," or
No,
do you kind of
not
like
like
wait?
that.
Okay, so talk about what it looks like for you.
Yeah, so the very first thing I do is before feet hit the ground is I take a big breath and sort of just get into body, which I know that sounds silly and someone might say, what's that have to do with IFS? Has everything to do with IFS and
Mhm.
everything to do with a lot of practices, right? But if you think of it, IFS is mindfulness on steroids, right?
Mhm.
It takes mindfulness and does it a little bit more formulaic, if you will. And so connecting with our body and our breath is critical, I think, in any of the IFS practices that we might engage in outside of a session with someone. So I take a deep breath and I sort of just settle into my body and kind of just notice. Nothing else is happening at that moment. I just notice. I'm like, okay. Then I do my thing, go to the bathroom, do my stuff, drink a huge glass of water. Then what I do is my real deliberate IFS practice, daily practice begins when I do my coffee in the morning. So I'm a pour over coffee girl. Um, and so when I do my pour over, I actually, this is funny. Some people know this, and I've actually posted this at places, but I'm a pour over coffee girl, and I also love Prince. And I love this, the first line, dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to celebrate, to get through this thing called life. And that's what I say to my parts every single morning as I'm doing my pour over. So I'm like, dearly beloved, we're here to get, we're here today to get through this thing called life. And I'm like, okay, who's there? Who needs me? So I
That's so
actually ask, yeah.
sweet.
So I actually ask them, who's there? So as I'm doing my pour over and I'm taking my time, doing my swirl, my roundabout hot water over the coffee, watching the carbon dioxide bubbles bubble for 33 seconds. And, like there's all very ritualistic. In the dark, trying to make sure I don't wake up my daughter because she wakes up any earlier than she does already, I would lose my mind. So it's like this kind of like sacred, very like sacred moment for me. Um, so I actually say good morning to my parts by using Prince's line of his song every day. I also have a mug that says that from a client of mine, very sweet. And so that's my morning. That's how I start. Because, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but I love that because I think when we say the word practice, it does make it sound like yeah, I wake up and maybe it is that way for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you just simply engage in your ritual and quiet time while you're making your coffee, it just feels so realistic and human. That's all. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and it's something I do every day. Like
Yeah,
that's something I do, meaning like I drink my coffee every day. And
exactly.
that's like, so what a great time as I'm standing there to just go, hey, morning, y'all, what's up? Right. Like I have my
Mhm.
little saying, my shtick that I do with them because I think it's partially funny, but it makes me happy too. And they are they are dearly beloveds.
Mhm.
It's like, all right,
Mhm.
y'all, how do we get through this thing called life together? And I'm here. Like, what do you need from
Mhm.
me to help get through today?
Mhm.
Right. And that's my indication to them, like, hello, good morning. Who's there? Who's there? Right. And at that moment in time, some mornings it's quiet and maybe no one inside is up yet. Some mornings it's already like, okay, yeah, I'm anxious about this. I'm scared about this. I have anticipation. I'm excited. I'm, overthinking. Like, sometimes there might be a boatload of parts, physical sensations, or thoughts that wave their hands and say, hello, yes, I'm in need of something, or I'm just know I'm here. So that's
Mhm.
how I start. And then from there, pending who's there and what the needs are, that would sort of dictate what my next steps are. right? So sometimes it's like, okay, cool, just know I'm here if you need anything as the day goes on. Or, hey, yeah,
Mhm.
just a reminder, I've got this. Yeah, I get why you're anxious. Yeah, that's a really big, important meeting we have, or, whatever it might be. And just remember, I'm here. I've got this. So, is there anything you need to feel a little less anxious, right? So I'm talking to them like I would you, right? Like if
Mhm.
you came to me as a dearly beloved friend and you're like, God, I'm having a hard time, I'd be like, okay, tell me more. What do you need? Like, what's
Mhm.
up? Right? I wouldn't be judging you or talking shit to you or like, I'd be like, all right, bud, what's up? Right? And so I'm doing the same with them. Any that may need a deepening of a conversation, I'm having it not hours long, but just a quick, like, all right, little morning huddle, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I feel like when I have done that, or like when I do that, um usually my system still is kind of in this place where I tend to wait until it's like screaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I'm sure happens to
Mm-hmm.
you as well. And
Yeah.
I love yeah, I love the honor that that kind of example just gives, the fact that like whoever is showing up
Mm-hmm.
can show up and talk like right now,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
and it's kind of like such a predictable ritual in your life that it's like, and I don't know if maybe this is like a little bit woo-woo, but it does translate where it's like the system kind of knows that every morning there's that huddle. And so it's like
Mm-hmm.
they will have an opportunity to come up every morning. It's this predictable thing where maybe they don't have to always wait until they're screaming. So I guess I can
Right.
take some advice here. Maybe when I do my French press, because we both have coffee
Yes. There we
routines,
go. Yep.
I can do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you think of it, right? Like, and even days, I mean, I do it every day. And some days definitely feels like self is engaging, really, truly, and wholly in it. And some days it may be more self like parts who are going through the motion. Regardless, it still gives, like you said, a predictable, at least a guaranteed one time a day predictable opportunity for parts to know
Hmm.
I'm there.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes they still scream. A lot of times, like this week, I've had parts screaming a lot of the day. Um, and so, yeah, but it's still a touchstone, still like a touch, like a moment that they know they're going to get. So that's how I start it. And then from there, pending if there's some that need a lot more time, then I have a little parts wait list I have that I'll be like, okay, your name's going to go on the wait list. And then I promise that I'll spend as much time as you need when I can give you the time you actually deserve. And sometimes they're like, okay, well, when's that going to be? Like, it needs to be in the next 24 hours. Cool. We'll do that. And then I just put them down on my little wait list, like my little waiting room list, if you will.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and then I deepen a practice. I haven't, obviously that's when the 6 Fs and I'm doing more
Hmm.
intensive work with them, if you will.
Which I want to at least briefly dive into here in a second, that
Mhm.
6 Fs, but I love that wait list. I love the coffee. I love the wait list because the reality is, I mean, at least in my life, which I'm childless. I've got lots of like fun
Mhm.
projects and things that I do, but I do have more time freedom than others. So
Yeah.
I do realize that maybe this statement won't be true for everyone. And I do want to believe you also have a shit ton going on in your life. And if a part says within 24 hours, I feel like most all of us can make the 5 or 10 minutes for a part in a 24 hours, if especially if
Mhm.
it's screaming, because us not giving it that time just means that it's
Oh,
going to
yeah.
scream louder or
Yeah.
get more, or that hierarchy system,
Mhm.
if it's
Yep.
firefighters, is going to come into play. So
Yeah.
it's like generally in our best interest, not to like
Yeah.
be held hostage, that's not obviously what I'm saying, but you know what I mean.
Well, and I want to highlight what you said, 5 or 10 minutes, because I think sometimes we get stuck in a belief or a myth that whatever therapeutic self-help practice we are doing, it's got to be really long and privileged and lengthy. And lengthy is another word for long, for those of you who don't know. I thought I would just say the same word a couple times. Right? No, it doesn't. It can actually be 5 minutes, and most of the time that's really what the part
Efficient.
needs.
Hmm.
Right.
You can get a
right?
lot done in
Yeah.
your dang head in 5 minutes. Are you kidding?
Right. I mean, like think of a kiddo crying. Yeah, sometimes they tantrum for longer than that, but it's like you spend 5 deliberate minutes looking at them, seeing them, and hearing them. Usually, the volume's turned down to ton.
Mm-hmm. Enough that we
Right.
can go about our days and like and then more time, like as more time
Mhm.
passes and more attention and like engagement and relationship building, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
after 20 minutes, it's totally cool.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Like,
right. Like,
so thank you for validating that as somebody who
yeah.
has kids and has a lot of extracurriculars and work and jobs and all of this, because I feel like it's totally realistic, especially like
Mhm.
definitely in my life. And so I would love to believe that for the vast majority, especially because we're talking about our own self-care, like our own
Mhm.
inner self-care. Um, However,
And
and
doing it
before,
imperfectly is better than not doing it. Like,
right.
if you have 5 minutes and maybe it's a rush 5 minutes while you're taking a shower or brushing your teeth, it's still 5 minutes to connect with the part. And it doesn't have to look perfect, like you sitting on this cushion in this serene place with incense burning to really have a deeply spiritual connective experience with your part.
Yeah, the fact of the matter, like when you're refilling your water bottle at
Right.
the water fountain
Right.
or whatever, if people ever are brave enough to drink from those anymore. But yeah, I think, driving that point home, there's so much opportunity that I think we just like mindlessly, I don't want to say waste during the day, but it's like we just mindlessly utilize during the day,
Mhm.
and it's like you can do two things at once when it comes to
Right.
this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I want to get into it. Would you briefly go over, because I also want to talk about sort of some exercises and skills that I'm sure that we both use, even though they may be different when parts are like really screaming. But you mentioned the 6 Fs, and so I want to like just quickly, would you
Yeah.
gloss over kind of what that means?
Yeah. So the 6 Fs are essentially a guideline that I.F.S has created to help therapists and or practitioners know how to work with the part. So essentially, no matter what type of part it is, whether it's a protector or an exile, there is always going to be a starting place of working with the 6 Fs. So in I.F.S, we usually consider whichever part we're spending or trying to spend the deliberate, intentional time with, giving our attention to specifically. We call that our target part. So the 6 Fs start with the target part. So let's suppose it's the part of me that was mindlessly shoveling. And mind you, these are like crumbs at this point in the bag, right? Of chips. So they're not even like really large pieces. So that didn't help them make it to my mouth in a desperate way either. So, let's suppose I want to work with that part that's like, like just scarfing this down. So that could be my target part. So the first F is find. So that's where we're trying to find that part. And in I.F.S is a psychospiritual therapy model that also brings in somatic models, if you will. And so find is, finding that part in or around your body. So if I were to think about, start connecting, if I was able to pull myself away from that bag of chips without it being empty, I would, say, all right, so chip eater. All right, where am I noticing you in or around my body? And one might go, oh, well, that's obvious in your stomach or in your hands because you're scarfing food. No, we actually ask the part, right? We check in, find it in my
Mhm.
body. And I can tell you that that part would have actually been like an anxiety up in my chest. Um, so then after we find the part, we kind of deepen the finding and start focusing on it and really focusing on our attention and how that part is showing up in or around our body. What are the physical association sensations associated with the feelings in my chest? Is it a tightening, a tingling, an expansion? Is it generalized? Is it, expansive? And, how is this part showing up, right? How are we experiencing it? Does it have a shape or a color or an energy? So we have find, we have focus, and then we have feel towards. And in that moment, as I'm experiencing this part through the first 2 Fs, how am I, the adult, the one who doesn't carry the pain, my highest self, hint, hint, self energy, how am I feeling towards this part? And that's kind of our like barometer to get clear on self energy. Do I have self
Mm-hmm.
online, or am I blended with other parts that have feelings around it? So I could tell
Mm-hmm.
you real quick that night, that Tuesday night, I had parts that were like, you're disgusting. Pull it together. Oh my God. Like, stop scarfing the chips. Right. So if that's how I'm feeling towards that part, that's a huge like siren for me that I don't have much self energy online. So at that point, I would then want to get that part that feels disgusted to give me a little bit of space. Right. So that's that unblending piece. And then once I'm able to find some sliver, some percentage, some glimmer of self that has a quality or an essence of those C's, compassion, curiosity, calm, clarity, whatever it might be, towards the target part, then you can continue to kind of proceed in deepening the connection to the part, right? So find the part in or around your body, focus on the part, on how you're experiencing it, how it's showing up, how do you feel towards this part. That sometimes we have to stay there for a bit, right? Because it's like, okay, I might have to unblend some other parts that have feelings around it. And then the next F's, what did I say? I said 3. So the next 3 F's is where the deepening of the connection and the, sorry, you probably hear my dog. It sounds like he's tap dancing on the floor. Is the deepening of the relationship between self and target part. So the next F is a bit contrived because it actually doesn't start with an F. It's befriend, so that there's an F in the word. So the next F is where we begin to befriend the part, which is where we're letting the part know that self is there. So whatever qualities of self one might be experiencing, you then begin extending it to the part, like through validation, or send that compassion to this part. Whatever you might be feeling, let it know you're really curious. Let it know your intention is just to get to know it. And that is helping solidify the relationship between part and self. Now, the befriending also is getting clear on who the heck the part thinks is talking to it right now. Because a lot of times the part has they're like, oh, cool, someone's talking to me, but I don't know who it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the befriending is an opportunity to get really clear that, hey, this is the 47-year-old Amy, the one who doesn't carry the pain. Let me update you on my life. Let me share a little bit about me. Okay, now you know who I am. Cool. Because a lot of times the part we're working with still thinks we're the age we were back when they got their job. Right. So the befriending is also an opportunity for that updating of the part that we
Mm-hmm.
often do in I.F.S. Right. So then once some of that relationship has been established, and if you've been working with your parts, this can actually go really, really quite fast. However, if you're newer to the model, this is often, especially in therapy, where you spend a lot of time, right? Your therapist will spend a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time befriending, then unblending, because it's clear self is somehow gotten behind the clouds. So this is really where a lot of the work is done. And then the next F is find out about the part. So this is almost where you're getting to know the part, what it does for you, what its highest intention is for you, what its job is, how long it's been doing its job. So this is like what I like to call the coffee talk part of I.F.S, where you're actually like, okay, hey, tell me about you. How old were
Mm-hmm.
you when you got this job? What was going on for you when you got this job? What are you trying to do for me? Right? Like if I'm talking to my own parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That can also take a bit of time, because this might be the first time this part is like, oh my gosh, someone's actually listening to me. Interesting, right? And then the last F is, I know you said do this quickly. There's nothing quick about this, but the
No, it's
last
good. It's great information.
so the last F is fears, which is really finding out what the part's afraid of. Any of its fears in general, but in particular, what is it afraid would happen if it stopped doing its job, right? Because that's pretty telling as to what it's doing for our system, right? If I would have asked the chip eating firefighter the other day, it would have said, well, I'm afraid that you'll start feeling everything underneath this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I'll say, oh, okay, so tell me more about that. Well, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Wow, thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much. And what if I could tell you that I'm okay and I could handle that? I don't know. There's been times you haven't. Yeah, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Other parts of me have struggled with it sometimes. What do you need to trust me just a little bit more that I can be okay feeling it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So and that's such a deepening of the practice that takes time to understand how to talk to our parts and all of that. And I know we've said that much earlier in earlier episodes. But yeah, so find, focus, feel towards, befriend, find out, and then fears.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's basically a mini, I mean, I'm simplifying a I.F.S therapy session, but it's a mini I.F.S therapy session, as far as outside of the unburdening and all of that.
Right.
And I wanted you to go into that. I'm glad that you took a little bit of time to explain each of them, because it gives us sort of a bit of a roadmap, you know what I mean, when they do come up. And I wanted you to do that before we kind of talked about just briefly some general skills that maybe you and I think that we've probably just sort of like thrown in to other episodes, but a lot of the skills that I use, mainly journaling, art, kind of like creative stuff, and then like head of the table meditation, they really are different ways to do the 6 Fs. You know what I mean?
So.
And take the U-turn. So like some of mine, like I said, like journaling, you've mentioned on the podcast before, like journaling from that part. I feel like since I've really sort of gotten into I.F.S over the last couple of years, it's like every time I journal, it just sort of like naturally ends up that I recognize, like whether I'm actually journaling from the dialogue or the framework of that part's perspective, I end up being able to say like, oh, this is my whatever part coming up. And like I just end up getting into self. But I also love what you have shared, like I said on the podcast before, where it's like, I love actually journaling from that part when I'm feeling really blended, just sitting down and just like journaling and then signing off from whatever's going on. And then same concept for like artwork, like I'll just grab crayons and like scribble and stuff like that. And then the head of the table meditation is kind of like a different thing that I think would be interesting to talk about, or even do an example of one time for people. I find it super duper helpful. But it's basically like, you put self at the head of the table in the boardroom and invite. We might have actually talked about it on some episodes, but invite all of the parts, firefighters, managers, everybody to.
I think like maybe on CSIS we talked for a hot second, but the conference table is definitely a great exercise of visualizing you, the adult you, at the head of the table, and then inviting whatever parts are showing up to sit on whatever side they need to, with whatever exhale energy is at the foot of the table, and then letting self kind of hold a meeting, if you will, right? Hearing from everybody, letting everyone know that all their opinions and feelings are important and valid and they'll all be heard, right? Super valuable one.
You used to do, and I'm not sure if this is really a daily skill. Sorry if I'm kind of taking you off track here, but I know that you used to have this like big ass notebook that you did everybody's origin stories in, and like all of that. Is that anything that you have been doing it for long enough that I feel like you probably know your system well enough that there's not new parts coming up all of the time, but I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I kind of jokingly call it, and I think I may have gotten this from Michelle Glass, I.F.S certified practitioner. She has a cool book out called Daily Parts Meditation. And I think she might reference something like a parts card catalog of sorts. I've taken that a bit and just adopted my own style to it, where I just have boatloads of journals, the ones like that don't have lines, but I've got my controlling rigid parts, like the writing utensils and things to be a certain way. So like I like the hardbound kind of sketch books that have no lines on them, because sometimes I want to draw, sometimes I want to write, and so I want the freedom of space. And so I have I have not all, but a lot of my bigger parts in there, where it's like all of the information, their ages, their jobs, when their origin story, like you said, how they got their job, if I've unburdened them, what else they need or want, where we're at in the process. So kind of like a a record of sorts.
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Okay, anyway, sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead on your like kind of because you
Oh
got
no.
like your ritual in the morning and then like what happens when it's a parts party or you're shoveling salsa and chips,
Well, Tuesday I didn't do anything. I just kept shoveling salsa and chips until the bag was done.
which is
If
okay too and
Which is
happens.
okay. And it was really just a third of the bag left. So part of me feels like I should say that to lessen judgment both within and without.
Sure.
And so, yeah, so I didn't do much that in that moment. I'm not going to lie. I did, though, the day after get really clear. Right. And so I think that's an important thing, too, is that sometimes it maybe we can't do the work in the moment. I
Mm-hmm.
knew what was going on. Like I was very clear. Like, okay, yeah, this is a part. I mean, I
For
think I even
sure.
said it to you, right? Like
Yeah.
I was speaking in parts language, but I
Yeah.
didn't give a damn about changing it at that moment or
Mm-mm.
getting curious about it. I
Mm-mm.
didn't care.
And I thank you for saying that because that's reality. Like that happens. I'll be
Uh-huh.
literally like doing something and in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what this is and this is what it's about
Mhm.
and yada yada yada. And I just keep doing it. And I
Right.
think that's just kind of like the spice of being human.
For sure.
To
You
some
know.
degree, as long as you're
And
not doing something dangerous.
well, right. And I'm really thankful that most of my impulsive and reactionary behaviors are pretty low consequence.
Hmm.
And that's not the same for everyone. Um, but yeah, I didn't care at that moment. So I just kept doing what I was doing. And then Wednesday, I zoomed out and I definitely spent some time and it was more deliberate where I did sit down and I did some of the 6Fs with the part, because I know my system well enough and I know the model really well. I I have the privilege of kind of being able to just organically kind of
Right.
cliff note my way into the part, and they all know me well enough where they're like, "Oh, you're back. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is what was going on." You know. And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing." And then
Hmm.
usually they're like, "Right on." And then energetically they've sort of dissolved a bit. So there are times that I have to get more deliberate and do need to do a deeper practice with my parts. And sometimes that might be a week later, right?
Hmm.
But again, what I do is I write like in my little waiting room, like little list. I'm like, you guys are all in good company and I'm not, abandoning you or banishing you. It's just you're so important that I want to make sure your name gets on the list so that I can give you the time you deserve when I have it.
Hmm.
Right. And then not same thing. I'll draw them out. I'll dance. I'll put on music that they want to hear and dance and do movement
Hmm.
and not good dance, not quality dance, but dance nonetheless. Um, I'll walk. Like I love
Hmm.
walking. I'll just go so I bring I.F.S to life in any of the ways I possibly can. So when it's a parts circus, I try when I can to slow it down and get curious and see if they can give me some space. If they can't, I'm like, all right, well, we'll check in later, you know.
Hmm. Well, and that's kind of, I want to kind of get into the closing here in a minute. And, we've talked about it through episode after episode because it's just the reality of life in IFS and all of it as it is like there will be polarizations. You will have to call on
Mhm.
self-like parts. You will be blended AF sometimes.
Mhm.
There will be chips and salsa moments and then chips and salsa moments. Like,
Uh-huh.
and you will have to repair and you will,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
I think that's why I don't know. I feel really grounded after talking to you about like real life in IFS
Mhm.
sometimes, because we live in real life and have just
Mhm.
like this up and down experience sometimes, from day to day or week to week or month to month or year to year. And
Yeah.
I think it's really important to be able to provide people with what to do and let
Mhm.
everybody know like that's normal,
Mhm.
like that's normal to degrees, of course.
For sure. Well, and if you are listening and you're like, wow, that sounds really cool and it sounds easy for Amy, even on days that she can't do her own work as effectively as she would like to, that's cool. She still has the framework and understands. Yes, it is cool. And like I said, that's a privileged stance that I have with it. And it's taken me time. So
Of course.
it's well deserved.
Yeah.
But, like on Insight Timer, It's a free app. There are boatloads of I.F.S meditation. So if you don't know how to do this work yourself, which you probably shouldn't unless you're working with me or someone else who does real I.F.S, go on Insight Timer, and there's like Dick Schwartz has a handful of meditations on there, all of which guide you to connect with a part of you that you would like to get to know more. So if you don't know the line of questionings, guess what, people, before you do. So there are resources out there, and that's the one I think is one of the most effective, easily accessible. And his meditations are 12 minutes or under. Cool.
YouTube,
guess what? Yeah.
He's all over YouTube. You can listen to other podcasts that have, I.F.S people on it. Like there's so many free, accessible resources out there. You can just play back a lot of our episodes on repeat and binge those to bring yourself back in.
Yeah. And, and there's times like I will go onto Insight Timer myself and put on one of my go-to meditations on there when I don't also want to have to think about it myself on some level. I want someone else to kind of guide me through. Right. And he has one called Embodying a Part, I think. And that one's one of my favorites, that he does. There's also, I think, one he calls One Part, where you're choosing a target part. And he's basically walking you through the 6 Fs. Cool. Easy. Free. Right. And then once you kind of start getting that down, then you can begin to kind of organically even do it on your own a little bit more.
Well, yeah, if you can do it really formally with the founder of I.F.S in 12 minutes or under, you get practiced. And like what you're saying is totally true. It can happen, of course, depending on the severity of the activation on the part, it can be 3 minutes or under. And then it's like a flip switches. It's really magical. So,
and even if it's not a full flip, but just a dimmer, that's great too.
That's great too. And that's really what it's about. And sometimes it will be a full flip. Yes, thank you. I'm grateful for you sharing a lot of your ritual and just bringing humanity to the whole thing, because I think it can be really intimidating. I actually was in a conversation today in a management meeting about how I.F.S can be intimidating if you don't know all the nuance and all of that. And it's really not. It's rad to geek out on for those of us who, love it. And it's pretty simplistic at its base form. So, well, thank you everybody for listening and tuning back into the Turning In podcast.
Sorry to interrupt. But we need to put Prince's Let's Go Crazy
on Spotify
on the song. Yeah.
And I realize, I haven't been linking the Spotify playlist in our episode show notes, so I will begin to do that. Please, as always, I say it every time, if you are enjoying your listening experience, make sure to leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts, and then give us a follow on Instagram. Our Instagram is @TurningInPod. Amy's Instagram is @TurningInWithAmy, and mine is @MCJSLC. And that is that, everybody. Thanks for listening to our daily skills episode, and we will keep coming back with rad AF I.F.S conversation.
Boom.
Boom. Goodbye, everybody.